areas. Hello and welcome to this episode of Her Talk Show. This podcast is dedicated to the growth mindset. You see, I believe that you know something that I don't know, and I also believe that I know something that you don't know. And the only way for each of us to rise in our knowings is for us to sit in a room and talk about all the things. For those of you that are and love inspirational content like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button, follow, like, and share. I am your host, Sabrina Victoria.
We come to you every day with the best speakers, relationship coaches, spiritual mentors, trailblazers, business owners, authors, young hustlers, podcasters, entrepreneurs, fitness trainers, therapists, financial advisors, and more. We ask our guests one question. What do you know that I don't know? Get ready, because today's guest is about to change the way you view your world. This is Her Talk Show, hosted by Sabrina Victoria.
Hello, my ladies, and all of you gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us today for this episode of Her Talk Show. We have had over 400 women grace this stage, and we are adding another one to the list today. If you are watching live, welcome. If you are watching on the replay, make sure you hashtag replay wherever you're at so we can send you some love. Either way, if you are watching this video, make sure you share it. This way we can get more eyes and more ears on the content that's about to be shared today. Her Talk Show is here to inspire, and we want you thinking outside the box in no time. Today, I'm speaking with an amazing woman named Dr. Cortney S. Warren. Dr. Cortney is a board-certified clinical psychologist and adjunct clinical professor in the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Health at the Kirk School of Medicine and University of Nevada, Los Angeles. Having won numerous professional awards for her research, Cortney is an expert in addictions, I love this, romantic relationships, eating pathology, and the practice of psychotherapy from a cross-cultural perspective. Her newest work is a self-help book that explores breakups through an addictive framework called Letting Go of Your Ex, CBT Skills to Heal the Pain of a Breakup and Overcome Love Addiction. Yes, I love this. I'm so excited to have Dr. Cortney here today.
Thank you, Sabrina. That was such a mouthful. I wish that I had just tweaked it for you. You could just say, Dr. Cortney, talking about mental health and how we can all evolve and emerge through heartache and challenging life circumstances, because we're all going to have them, right?
Yes.
So,
yes. And then even when you get over
uh-oh, Sabrina, I think I lost you. I can't hear you. I may have lost her. I don't know if you guys can still hear me or not. Let's see. Is there something that I can do to get her back? I think she's coming back. Maybe she's coming back. I don't know what I can do. I don't think there's anything I can change. Sabrina, I lost you. Well, if you can hear me out there, my name is Dr. Cortney Warren, and I just wrote a self-help book on breakups, because romantic love and breakups are something that almost all of us are going to experience as humans. You're very likely to fall in love in this life, and you're also very likely to have your heart broken. And for most of us, we are going to live through a heartache that is absolutely miserable, painful, gut-wrenching, that leaves you sobbing in the corner in a dark room, not wanting to see the light of day, with no real vision of what your life is going to look like without this person in it anymore. And so if you're going through one of those breakups, I wrote this book for you. It's called Letting Go of Your Ex. It is based on a cognitive behavioral model of addictions. And so why that's important is that there is really an emerging body of research to suggest that when you fall madly in love with someone, you actually are activating a very old part of your brain that is associated with drives, with needs, with basic foundational survival based needs that we have as humans. And so if you fall in love, you are biologically and evolutionarily programmed to become addicted in some way to this person. You're going to think about them. You're going to crave them. You're going to want to be with them as much as possible. You're going to be planning for a future with them. You're going to have a fantasy version of what your life looks like potentially in the future with them in it. And because of that, when you break up in a situation like that, it can throw you into an addictive cycle of heartache that's very difficult to get out of. So this book was written as a self-help guide, as if you were sitting in my office with me, talking you through what can you do to help yourself stop your symptoms, heal the pain that you're in, emerge as a transformed, stronger, more authentic version of yourself who's really okay with or without your ex. So I don't know if anybody could hear that. I'm going to check my email just in case Sabrina sent me a message. Let's see here. I lost you. Let's see. I don't know how to get her back.
Even though
Is that you?
Yeah, even though I'm gone and I'm just like off doing my own thing in La La Land, StreamYard is just like, I'm still here waiting for you. I love it.
You know what? I'm so glad you came back. I gave a little spiel because I was afraid that there might be people listening who were just
We're live.
So maybe for any of you out there, we lost Sabrina, but perhaps you got a little taste of of what I've been doing lately and how I hope it helps people.
You're the best. This is what happens, right? This is technology. This is the world of podcasting. This is the world of Zoom rooms.
Isn't this kind of the way life has been in the last few years? You know, it occurs to me that through COVID, I think it sort of forced most of us, whether we liked it or not, to become more flexible because it was so apparent that we had so few things that we could control. And all the time, you would probably make a plan in your life or think you were going to work or worried about getting a test. And then it would be like, oh, well, that travel plan is out the window, or that work event, or gosh, I don't even know where I'm going to get my next paycheck because my office is now closed. And so I'm going to have to find a way, right? So we're becoming more flexible, which isn't inherently a bad thing. I think I lost Sabrina again. Oh dear. I'll say something about the flexibility in case there's anyone listening out there. Developing resiliency is so important in life because whether it's a breakup or you're dating someone who's really abusive, which I know that Sabrina has talked about narcissism and her life experiences on her shows. You've lost a job, you're trying to be a good parent, whatever it is, you're going to go through some painful life experiences. And so the question then becomes, what are you going to do with this information? Are you going to use it to understand yourself and grow and heal and move transformed forward? Or are you going to let it break you? And I think the goal for all of us is to take the information that we have at the time, do the best that we can with it, and make choices that consistently help us and don't hurt us. And as you get new information, that might mean you have to change your choices. But all you can do is take in the information as it exists today and strive to use it to help yourself and not hurt yourself.
Yes, totally agree. I love that. How did you wind up falling into the world of love, by the way?
Sabrina, it was completely an accident, I would say. Aside from being a human and dating, as all of us do really as humans, this is part of our journey. This is part of our psychological development, is dating and having romantic relationships and figuring ourselves out in that context. So I struggled a lot in my romantic relationships, particularly as through adolescence and early adulthood. And at the time, I knew that I was struggling, but I didn't really fully understand why. Why did I have such a hard time with intimacy? Why was it scary for me to get close to people or trust people? Why was I attracted to men who, for the most part, weren't really emotionally available? Those kinds of questions. And so, although it wasn't my area of expertise in psychology, I predominantly study eating disorders and addictions. That is where most of my publications are, most of my research. But what happened is I gave a TEDx talk on self-deception, the psychology of self-deception, how we lie to ourselves, why it's a problem, and how to start getting more honest. And in that talk, I used myself in romantic relationships as an example, because when I was younger, I would have told you a whole bunch of lies that I didn't know were lies because I didn't know myself well enough at the time. I would have said, I don't feel close because I date people who are unavailable. I don't feel good because they're talking to me in a way that isn't okay with me. But if they did X, Y, and Z, then I would feel better. Then I would feel whole and healed. Then I would be able to be safe and secure in a romantic relationship with a man. And although there are elements of truth to that, because probably there were some people I dated who weren't the best choices for me, the big glaring elephant in the room was that I was never going to feel safe in my romantic relationships until I started feeling safe in my own skin.
Ooh.
That. And it really launched a whole bunch of questions from people. I started getting inundated with questions about breakups and romantic relationships and how can I understand myself as I'm dating, and I'm going through this miserable breakup where I feel addicted to my ex. I can't stop thinking about them. I'm questioning why it ended. I want answers. I'm following them. I'm looking them up on social media. I feel like I'm addicted to them, but they're not even a part of my life anymore. And I intellectually don't even like them. I don't even want to be associated with them anymore. Why is this happening? And that really was the inspiration for writing this book. It was to empower women to use their romantic relationships as a platform for self-discovery and to use your observations about yourself to find truths with a capital T about your value, which is inherently there, whether you're with your ex or not, or whether you're dating the right person or not, or whether you have the right family or not, or you're educated or whatever it is. You have value because you exist. You actually give yourself value in this life. And whether anyone loves you or wants you or thinks you're beautiful is actually irrelevant to your identity-based value. And so because romantic relationships are such a platform for learning, so many of us struggle in them. We struggle in them. We struggle through breakups. We struggle through divorces. We struggle through abusive relationships sometimes. And the more I can help all of us see this as a big experiment of self-exploration and understand that there's nothing wrong with you if you're struggling to get over an ex. Actually, there's a very high chance that if you fell in love if you had that madly in love, head over heels experience, your brain and biology was on fire in a way that is evolutionarily driving you to feel addicted to your ex. That we as humans are animals first. And from a biological perspective, our body is primed to want us to fixate on one person, fall in love with them, have sex, make babies, and stay together long enough to ensure that the kid and you and your species is going to survive, right? And so when people would say to me, I feel crazy, I feel like I'm losing my mind, I don't know who I am anymore, the first thing I want to tell people is you're not crazy. You're not alone. And actually, we have a lot of evidence to suggest that this is a very normal reaction to a breakup when you really cared about somebody deeply. And there are a host of skills that you can learn and use to help yourself heal so that this actually is just one step of a much larger life story that you have left to live.
I love that. And I was going to actually say that. Like, I feel like that's normal. When you break up with somebody. Yeah, that you do. What's the difference? So when I think of the word addiction, I think of like, those romance movies where there's just like a stalker and he just won't leave you alone.
Yeah.
And then there's also just like normalcy, right? Like I've been through breakups and you think of the person for a very long extended amount of time and then you get over it, whatever.
Yes.
What's the difference? Because there are people that are obsessive.
Yes. Love addiction is not a clinical diagnosis. So I should say that right off the bat. This isn't something where you'd come into my office and I would diagnose you as a love addict. I also want you to know that you're not likely to feel addicted to everybody that you date. So like you just said, Sabrina, it's very likely that you will date people in your life and break up, and breakups are never really fun, but it won't really throw you into a tailspin. It might even be a relief, right? So you're not always going to have that passionate feeling. When I think about love addiction, particularly in the context of people who are really struggling to get over their ex, what I mean by that is they're having an emotional and behavioral reaction to the breakup that is like their ex is a drug. They're thinking about them. They're obsessing over them. They're craving contact. They want answers. They want to reach out. They want to stalk them on social media or drive by their house to see if their car is there. They may wear their old clothes or look through old pictures. And it causes a tremendous amount of emotional distress. They are struggling. They are sad. They are feeling depressed and anxious oftentimes. And they're going to act in ways that ultimately are either trying to distract them from the breakup or feel closer to their ex. And in those ways, that looks very much like an addictive cycle that we would see with drugs or alcohol, where you become hyper fixated on your drug of choice. You're waiting for that next drink. You're either drinking or you thinking about the next drink and planning for it, or you're in withdrawal from the last time you drank and are planning for the next time you're going to drink. And it becomes this hyper fixation on your drug of choice at the expense of almost everything else in your life. You'll stop having those close, intimate friendships. You'll stop hobbies that you used to love. You sort of become in this obsessive way fixated on your former lover as if you still need them, as if they're still in your life. And in that way, it looks like you're going through withdrawal. It looks like you're still hyper-focused on this person, even though you're not dating them anymore. And for any of you who've ever been in love, you probably can relate to that feeling in some way. When you fall in love, it's this fantasy drive where you're thinking about your mate and you're fixated on them. You want to touch them. You want to smell them. You want to be near them. They feel so important in your life. If you think about being in that state and then breaking up, it is a heart-wrenching experience that can leave you really with this addictive set of symptoms: the cravings, the obsessive thinking, the behavioral acting out in ways that are harmful for you in the long run, and the emotional distress. And in some level, it has to cause impairment to your life. So it's something that you actively don't want to be doing, that causes you pain, that you want to stop. But for whatever reason, you're finding it really hard to move on.
Is this why a lot of times, because there's kind of a joke that I say, I don't know if it's really a thing, but when somebody breaks up for the first time, I always low key am like, they're getting back together because of this thing that you're talking about, where like you get obsessive and then you text and then you wind up doing a lunch and then you just
Mhm.
wind up back
Mhm.
within like weeks of each other.
Yeah.
Is that the same? Like, there's like a part of me that's like, I'm listening to you and I'm like, yes, agree, get over it faster, let's get all the steps. And then also though, like some of those people end up getting married.
Mm. Mhm.
So like, what is that? How do you know the difference?
So what's so interesting about this that I think you're picking up on is that when you think about love as an addictive process, that means that falling in love, you could argue, is designed to make you addicted to your ex or to your lover, to your partner, but it isn't necessarily unhealthy for you. So usually when we talk about addictive behavior, it's got a lot of consequences that we're trying to stop or avoid. But when you think about love as actually a naturally addictive process that's euphoric, that's magical, that's one of the most amazing experiences we can have as humans naturally, it makes you high. That isn't necessarily bad. It isn't necessarily problematic. When it becomes problematic is when you are falling for someone who's really not healthy for you or who doesn't want to be with you. Then it can throw you into this churning, which is kind of what you're describing, this relationship churning where you're not ready to let go. They've become a part of your identity in some ways, especially for adolescents and young adults who don't have a lot of experience with romantic love, who are still very much trying to figure out who they are. You see that kind of churning difficulty, can't let go, can't get back together. And I don't want to say that that's inherently bad for you or harmful. What's really harmful is when you step into my office and you say, I'm going through a breakup. I am miserable. I can't get out of bed. I'm so upset. I'm thinking about them all the time. I'm checking for them on our dating app, and I can't seem to move on, even though I know it's over, even though I know they're not healthy for me. Or the people who are staying in a relationship because they're so fixated on their mate, but they intellectually know it's not healthy for them. They know they shouldn't stay with this person for whatever reason, and yet they can't stop thinking about them. They keep going back. They keep going back. They keep going back. Those are really the kinds of situations and scenarios that I'm talking about when I am talking about love as an addictive process that's unhealthy for us. And the kinds of people that often come to therapy or that are looking for self-help resources, that are going to Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous meetings or CODA meetings, trying to get some social support to understand how they got here, to stop their symptoms, to break the cycles sometimes, because of course our early childhood experiences and trauma will influence who you choose to date, right? I mean, we are so influenced by our culture and our peers and our upbringings. And so for some people, it requires unpacking a lot of that learning and why you're staying addicted to someone who you know isn't good for you.
Yeah.
So it becomes rather complicated, I guess I would say. But I think something that I really hope everybody hears from this is that there is a lot of emerging research to suggest that falling in love is meant to make you addicted to your partner. And there are some really wonderful elements of that and some elements of that that can be incredibly painful and difficult, particularly when you're trying to move on after a breakup.
Yeah. When I was in a very toxic relationship, I probably broke up with him like 100 times for real over the course of 12 years, 13
Mm,
years, something like that. Extremely toxic,
mm,
narcissistic tendencies. Um, and yeah, I can totally relate to this as far as hating him, not wanting anything to do with him, knowing deep down, even though I didn't know what narcissism was for the
mhm,
first 8 years of our relationship, um, just wanting to be in his presence still, even afterwards. And I know a lot of that has to do with also trauma bond, which sounds like it could be very similar to this.
mhm,
I had a very interesting experience though. Once I did finally completely cut things off with him,
mhm.
I did this thing for probably about a year and a half after we split. We went totally cold.
Okay.
Never heard from him ever again. I never reached out. He never reached out, completely cold. Um, and that had a lot to do with me. Like I set all the things in motion to make sure I had listened to 1,000 narcissistic videos on YouTube. So I knew exactly what I was doing and it worked perfectly in my favor. However, for a year and a half afterwards, every single night
Mm,
when I would go to sleep, I would purposely bring up a scenario in my head from my ex. Could have been
mm,
good or bad. It didn't matter.
mm,
And this is how I went to sleep every
mm,
night. Every
mm,
night, I would pull up a story in my head and like fall into the daydream of what that was to like help me sleep.
mm,
Would any idea what that is? Because
mm,
it's still kind of like I still think about it sometimes. Like even when I go to bed now, I don't really do it anymore, but I will sometimes think to myself in that habit of like, and it's been years now. I mean, it's been like
mm,
8 years now. But I do sometimes still like remember, and then I have to actually in my head, I have to be like, no, 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 we're not doing that anymore. I have to like
mhm,
erase it and then like
mhm,
pull up a different picture. But what is that?
mm.
Or what could it be?
It's so common after a breakup for people to relive experiences that they had with their ex in their own mind, which is a version of what you're describing, I think, where you are replaying a fight that you had. You're replaying the fight with the answers that you wish you had said at the time.
Hmm.
You are reliving a magical romantic moment or something that they used to do for you that made you feel strong or beautiful or sexy or whatever the fantasy was. You fixate on some aspect of the relationship and of your ex that was really good or really bad, but is yet unresolved.
Hmm.
That is something you're trying to work through or process. And sometimes it looks more like questions, like, why isn't this working? Why are they like that? Why did I do that? Why didn't I leave sooner? Why couldn't we make it work? If they loved me, then we'd still be together. The sort of narrative in your own mind of all of the unresolved stuff,
Yeah.
whatever it is. And essentially, part of that is probably processing the end of the relationship and trying to wrap our heads around the end of a meaningful relationship. Part of it is grieving because a lot of breakups have a grieving process associated because you're losing a dream, a person, a lifestyle, a fantasy of what could have been that isn't any longer. And even if it ended in a really negative way, where you left and you came to the point where you said, I don't want to be with you anymore, there still may be a grieving process for who you became, or for who you were, or for why you compromised yourself or your values. So a lot of that replaying is trying to process it. But what I will say is that trying to forget your ex and your relationship when it's on your mind is not helpful
Hmm.
all of the time, because you don't want to stuff down those old memories. They're still there. And if you're noticing that you're having intrusive thinking where they just pop into your mind, or you're replaying old scenes in your own mind that are upsetting to you, I don't want to tell you to stop thinking about it completely because it's still in there. But what we do want to help people do, myself included, is to have more self-efficacy over when you do and don't think about your past. And one way that's really helpful for people to learn to do that is to set aside a time of day. I call it a rumination time, where for 20 minutes, all you're supposed to do is think about your ex. The good, the bad, and the ugly. You can journal, you can scream, you can cry, you can read through old messages, you can relive those moments and say exactly what you wish you had said. And then when the time is over, it is now the opportunity to practice thought stopping or mindfulness. So those would be techniques that help you to not engage your rational mind in the thoughts that are popping into your head and are, generally speaking, disruptive. They can take away your focus. They can be unpleasant. I see this a lot in cheating situations where you had a breakup because there was infidelity, and people will just ruminate. What are they doing? Where are they? I caught him doing this. I caught her doing this. And you don't want that to be occupying your mind so much. So mindfulness is really learning to notice the automatic thoughts that are coming through your mind without judgment, without criticism, but also without giving them your attention and focus. It's more of I'm just noticing them kind of in a detached way going through my mind, and I just see them, but I'm not going to engage with them. Thought stopping is more active. It's more of a picturing a big stop sign or a flashing neon stop words, STOP, or any other version. Some people like an X symbol, whatever image you need in your mind. And anytime you have that memory or that thought, you literally cover it with the big X or the stop sign and you say, nope, not right now. I'm not available to think about this right now. I will think about it in my next rumination time, but not now, because I'm actively choosing to practice some skills that will help me get some control over my symptoms, which often includes the thinking.
That's fantastic. I love that. And I love this idea of an actual stop sign popping up in our heads while we're thinking of all the things. You mentioned grieving time. I'd like to take a moment to kind of talk about that, because just like anything, right? We all say everyone has their own time to grieve. And obviously the longer the relationship, maybe the longer, I mean, you have kids, if you're still contacting the person, there's all these different, when do we need a little kick in the butt though? Like when can we internally recognize and say, hey, we gotta move on. We gotta step up. We need to get on with the things.
Oh, I argue very strongly that so much of personal empowerment is choice. It's all about actively making the choices that seem really small in the moment, every minute of every day, so that over time you emerge to a place of acceptance of whatever your life circumstance is. The breakup, the loss of a loved one, the loss of a career, the loss of a dream. And so probably many of us have seen people or been someone who's experienced a loss and sort of been mired in that self-pity or sadness or anger. And from a psychological perspective, there are various stages of grief that we usually go through when there's a big loss in our life. It starts with denial and shock, right? Where it's like, this can't be happening. I can't be going through this. It transitions oftentimes into bargaining, where you're trying to figure out, well, can I fix it? What can I do differently? How can I undo this? How can I make a deal with God? Can I make a deal with my ex? Can I make a deal with my work? Whatever it is, to try to fix the situation I'm in, because it's so painful right now that I'll do anything to try to get out of it. And sometimes in a relationship churning situation, like we just mentioned, you'll find that where people don't actually want to be back with their ex, but the pain of being away from them and the fear of an uncertain future without them is so strong that it's safer and more comfortable to go back to something, even when that something isn't really very good for you or even very satisfying and fulfilling.
Yeah.
So bargaining, and then you move into a lot of emotion. Sometimes it's deep sadness and depressive symptoms. Sometimes it's anxiety. Sometimes it is anger, rage. But as you let yourself experience each of those and kind of acknowledge them for yourselves, for ourselves when we do this, a really wonderful place of acceptance can emerge where you can radically look at whatever it is that's happening in your life without sugarcoating it and make choices that say, this isn't something I ever want to go through again. This was brutal. This is painful, but this actually happened. So now what? What choices am I going to make for myself today, even if they seem tiny, even if it's, I'm going to get out of bed today and take a shower. I'm going to call my best friend who I haven't called in months because I've been so preoccupied with my own grief that I haven't been able to pick up the phone. And I'm just going to call and say, I love you. I'm sorry. I miss you. Maybe it's you vow that you're going to say kind words to yourself when you look in the mirror, because there's a lot of negative self-talk oftentimes after a breakup about your looks, about your value, about your desirability, about whether you're going to find another mate who could ever love you. Maybe that's your step today.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, you do those things and you do them every day and you just start practicing. And over time, with practice, it starts to become easier. It starts to become integrated habitually into your new life, which hopefully is one that will transform you and emerge into something very fulfilling and wonderful that you'll look back on the experience, maybe even with a smile, maybe even with a, wow, that sucked. But I actually learned something from that experience. I wouldn't be who I am today without it. And so I can actually look back on it with all of its misery and all of its beauty and say, thank you. Here I am.
That's beautiful. So you gave us a little bit of, or an awesome exercise to do when we are thinking about our ex. I want to talk specifically to a step or two that you could give us if we're right in the freaking middle of it, like it happened today or it happened yesterday. Those that are watching live, those that are watching on the replay, you know, what should we do to help us actually get over the ex? What's a couple of things you could share with us?
First thing, if you are going through a breakup right now, you're in the thick of it, I want you to know that you're not alone. Almost every single human on this planet will go through a brutal breakup at some point in their life.
Yeah.
And also, you are very likely to break someone else's heart. And I always try to give both of those perspectives because when we're mired in our own pain, it's really easy to forget that not only are other people going through this too, but that it's very likely that there's somebody coming into my office or looking at for a self-help book because they're trying to get over you. And so it gives us some perspective that we're all human. Love is a natural human experience. It's a drive. It's a need. It's a part of our DNA, really, at a very basic survival-based level. So you're not alone. The next thing is, I would say, pause. Don't make any big decisions. Usually when you're in the throes of a big life transition or a big breakup that's really painful, you want to do anything to feel better. People will make kind of haphazard choices just as a coping strategy. But usually if we're not thinking really clearly beforehand about what we're doing and why, we'll engage in behaviors that don't help us very much. And they may make you regret them later down the line when you go, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did that. So trying to pause, notice how you're feeling, don't do anything massive, and then put together a self-care plan. One of the first things on your self-care plan, if you're really serious about the breakup, is to try to reduce contact with your ex. And that's something that you shared about your breakup, that you didn't have any contact with your ex, which when you think of it as an addictive cycle is incredibly important. Because the more contact you have with your ex, the more you talk to them, the more you're texting them, the more you're looking for information about them online, you're still engaging in that part of your brain and body that is going to be going back for more. Right? So it keeps you in a non-relationship relationship. Finding a way to set boundaries where ideally you wouldn't have any contact with your ex for a while. If that's not possible, which is the case for some people, particularly if you have children together, then finding a way that you can engage but not stay as intimately connected. Generally, I recommend that people only communicate by email for a while and that they set very clear expectations about what they'll talk about and when. So I should clarify for just a moment too. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding in the world about what a boundary is. Many people talk about boundaries as if you're giving an ultimatum to another person of how they have to act and how they need to treat you. But the reality is that we don't have control over other people, and we don't have control over how they're going to treat us. So boundaries actually are not telling other people who to be or how to act. Boundaries are relationship expectations that you set based on who you are and how you want people to engage with you. And so when you think about setting a boundary with anyone, an ex, a parent, a friend, a child, I want you to start with what really matters to me about my relationships with people. What are my needs and goals? And how can I communicate those to someone else? So for example, in a breakup situation, you might say, we just broke up. This is really hard for me. I love you, but I know that this relationship needs to end. And so it isn't in my best interest to communicate with you at this moment about how we feel about each other or how hard it is or my emotional state. If you bring those things up to me, I'm not going to respond. And that's because this is my effort to try to help myself heal and move forward.
Absolutely.
And I hope that you do the same for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
So setting boundaries, cutting off contact, getting rid of their stuff in your physical space, sending it back to them, putting it in a box, giving it away, whatever it needs to be, so that you're not constantly reminded of them. You're not triggered by them everywhere you walk in this life that you used to have with them. Those are my first tips for somebody who's just going through this, just starting.
That's perfect. And I think it's also really important to recognize that there's different levels, just like what you opened up with when we first started talking. There are going to be people that you do have this love addiction with, and there are going to be people that you don't. And it's going to be different. So, throwing away an old sweatshirt that maybe doesn't bring back all of those, tingly feelings or whatever's going on, being able to hold on to that with no harm, no foul might be okay with some people in some relationships. And there might be total, disaster with other ones. So really checking in with yourself. I think that's great. Absolutely. We have a ton of people watching live. Thank you for being here, for hanging out with us.
I love that.
Yeah. Those watching on the replay, if you could hashtag replay wherever you are. But for those watching live, Dr. Cortney, I would love for you to let them know who should be contacting you. Who do you work with? Who do you help?
Who do I work with? Well, I am still a professor. So I do a lot of teaching and I do some workshops. I'm not currently taking clinical clients. I am so busy right now, but you are welcome to follow me on social media. I post a lot of tips on mental health. It's for educational and informational purposes only. So my goal is to bring solid, empirically grounded psychological information to people who are looking for it and trying to apply it to their own lives. I have my new book, Letting Go of Your Ex, which is available through whatever bookstore you might like, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever, Goodreads. And you're welcome to follow my YouTube channel. I do a lot of public speaking and lectures as well on self-deception. So as we mentioned, I think earlier, how you lie to yourself and why that's a problem, and on eating disorders and body image, and then on romantic relationships and love.
Perfect. Why do you do what you do?
I really think the best of what psychology has to offer is that it's the study of human nature. It's the study of us as animals, but it's also the study of us as a species who has the ability to critically think about who we are and what makes our life fulfilling. And so, as a journey of life, I really fundamentally believe that the more you understand yourself, the more you're going to leave this planet with no regret, because you're going to have lived and learned what you needed to make this life worth living, to make it meaningful, to make it inspiring, to make it the best of who we can be as humans and not the worst.
Fantastic. drcourtney.com. That's your website. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Sabrina. And I wish everyone out there the best. I hope you're not going through a terrible breakup, because I know, it can just be so miserable and so painful. My heart goes out to you. Also, if you have friends or family members or younger people in your life, college students, a shout out to the college students out there, the 18 to 25-year-old age range who's going through their first major breakup. It can be an incredibly difficult journey.
Yep.
So supporting all of us through that, and giving some resources to those who are perhaps just starting their romantic process of who they are and who they're dating as they go through it.
Yes. I liked how you said that when I asked about how to get over, and you said that we're all going to break up with somebody. So like somebody's going to break up with us, and then we're also going to break up with somebody. That kind of resonated with me, because I was on a roll in my early 20s of never being broken up with. So I was all like, ego, just like, I've never been broken up with. And a lot of that's trauma, because I would always break up with them beforehand, right? So now I know this. I didn't know that back then.
Yeah.
But the first time I ever got broken up with was on a freaking Post-it note. I went to his house. We were supposed to be going on a date, went to his house, arrived, and there's literally a Post-it note on the door that said, I've left. I no longer want to see you. And it was a long drive to his house. It was like an hour drive to his house. He's like, if you need to go in, it said, if you need to go in to use the restroom, feel free. And I called him up right away. He didn't answer. I went in. I'm like looking all over. I'm like, this guy's friggin', I can't even believe, my heart sunk. I mean, it was awful. I go to the bathroom. I'm calling him. He finally answers. And I'm like, what the hell? Like, what's going on? First of all, why didn't you just tell me earlier? And he goes, literally, this is what happened. Literally, while you were driving to my house, he worked from his home, and he had an assistant that worked with him. And apparently on my way driving to his house, his assistant professed her love for him. And he had a crush on her, I guess, but like nothing had ever come of it. Him and I had been seeing each other for maybe 3 or 4 months, nothing that long. But she professed her love for him while I was on the way to his house, and he didn't want us running into each other. So he just left with her and like scribbled some stuff down on a Post-it note and put it on the door as he was running out the door with her. This is what he told me. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
And then, yeah, so that was it. I literally never saw him again. And then about 6 months later or so, he calls me for the whole like, so sorry about that. Do you want to get back together again? And I was like, no, thanks. But what that taught me, what I really appreciated about that, which is exactly what you said, is when you're on both sides, not that I was ever horrible at breaking up with people. I've always been very empathetic and codependent just in general. So always very nice and kind and loving. However, it really helped me recognize being on the other side. And I was always very mindful of that, like going forward. I think it helped me going forward as far as like how I showed up in my relationships towards the end and really like creating some sort of exit plan that was good on like both sides. How horrible that felt.
I am going to go out on a limb and say that there are probably a lot of people out there listening who've been through some really, really bad breakups. And I've heard so many breakup stories, as you might imagine, over the course of my career. Some of them seem unbelievable. And I think also with online dating, which is now, so common and prevalent in the way that people date at this point, the ease with which people can break up, ghosting, breadcrumbing, some of these things that you'll hear, they're not clinical terms, but people talk about where they meet someone and they think they connect and they date for a while and then all of a sudden they're gone. Or they started dating online and then when it didn't work, they already felt attached to them, but they still have sort of a friendship situation online. And so it's murkier in many ways with the online dating. Breakups are really not ever fun. Rarely are they fun, but the ones that really cause that profound heartache, those are the ones that we really have to support each other through and be kind when we break up with someone, particularly if you know they really care about you. Because we're all in this love journey together, actually. We're all probably going to have this happen. And I do believe that our goal in this life as humans is to grow and evolve and learn to make choices that reflect grace, compassion, empathy, understanding, non-judgmentalism, because the more you can take an experience and see it from the higher learning, the more we will all be kinder to each other. The more we will coexist, the more we can ride through disagreements and conflict and adversity with an eye towards the bigger life picture, which is very hard to do in a time of conflict because we get very fixated on the details. When you're in pain, you get very fixated on the nuances of your life today in this moment. And it's very hard at those times to see the broader scope of your whole entire life. And a lot of times for those first loves, those ones that you have earlier in your life, for anyone who's had one, people will say that they feel completely lost. They don't know who they are anymore. They don't know how to navigate it because it's so all-consuming, and they will start telling themselves essentially lies like, no one's ever going to want me. I'm never going to find anybody else. I'm broken. I'm unlovable. And when those things start, the biggest way to combat them is to build up your self-esteem. And really, there are a lot of cognitive strategies in my book, but also that you can learn looking online, and how you can challenge thinking like that. That's very untrue and unhelpful, but in the moment it feels true. And those automatic thoughts will just run through your mind, even if you don't want them there, if you don't actively try to challenge them.
Is that the book behind you?
It is.
Let me see it.
Is. Letting go of your ex.
Oh, what
Yes.
a beautiful cover.
Thank you. Thank you so much. You know, do you have a copy? Let me send you one.
I would love that.
I would love to.
I still get, when I first started my coaching a decade ago, I was immersed in the world of narcissism because that's my storyline. So when you talk about heavy breakups, dude, intense. Yes, I would absolutely love that. Thank you so much for being here. This was fantastic. We could talk about love forever. But we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. Thank you for those of you that are hanging on all the way to the end. You know that these podcasts are usually about 35 to 45 minutes. So thank you so much for hanging out with us. Obviously, you're in love with Dr. Cortney. Make sure you follow her, hang out. Where do you hang out most? Facebook, Insta?
I have both. Yes, you are totally welcome. I don't respond to any comments directly, but I read them sometimes and I try to integrate them into what I post. So I'll answer any questions that people have in a more general sense.
I love that. Well, if you resonate with Dr. Cortney and all the awesomeness that she shared, make sure that you reach out to her. We love to connect people here on this platform in order to make sure we all continue to rise. Thank you so much for joining us here on Her Talk Show. This community is expanding every single day and is filled with females who are striving to do better than they did yesterday. For those of you that are new to this podcast and love content like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button, follow, like, and share. And if you have a story to share, reach out to me at hernation.life about being a guest on the podcast. I am your host, Sabrina Victoria, and I'm so grateful to be here sharing a platform that allows people to share their truth and inspire others. As always, do something